Well, we have Arise analyst and lawyer Frank Tietie joining us on Newsnight tonight. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So, I mean, it will take more than just calling on Nigeria's civil servants to shun and speak up against corruption. It will take more than just asking them to shun corruption. What are the incentives?
And who is making that call?
Well,
former permanent secretaries. In law, we say res ipsa loquitur, that is, the fact speaks for itself. Look at the state of our country and look at all those permanent secretaries that ran our country down and then trying to find some relevance, coming to say and now giving recommendation about corruption. Those permanent secretaries, the ones we just saw, I mean, we should stop making a laughing stock of ourselves.
Don't you think that's a bit harsh?
No, I mean, come on.
Are you putting it at the doorstep of the permanent secretaries?
Have you looked at the harsh economic situation facing Nigerians now? Look at the people who ran the federal public service for decades, coming out to tell us that about corruption. I mean, what are we talking about? Just trying to find some measure of relevance? So the best, you see, the Nigerian public service who is responsible for the highest form of corruption in this country. And it's been like that since the 70s, since the days of the Super PAMSEC. We are talking about persons who are the chief accounting officers of the various ministries of government. And then we have a country that is labeled as corrupt, that is a country that is, that is dysfunctional by these public servants, permanent secretaries. And then they ought to be apologizing to Nigerians for the kind of bad examples that they've shown. Look at the highly respected Ambassador Baba Gana Kingibe saying that it's becoming worse. Why won't it become worse? Because I know, I speak from personal experience, as a matter of knowledge, that the junior workers in service now are looking up to the permanent secretaries who are living a subsidized lifestyle, free cars, free drivers, free food, free money, fly around the world, come back from conferences, no report, no sense of responsibility, but with a big sense of entitlement. Nigeria just feeds them. And then what do we get? Look at our country. That's the result. And then these same public servants are the ones who form very strong unions so that they get more pay for doing less and less and less of work, less commitment to our country. I mean, it's a bit offensive that this is coming from a body of former permanent secretaries.
Frank, I'm quite sure a lot of Nigerians would quite understand why you're so incensed, because it's still happening till date.
Of course, yes.
Because you have a police force where no one thinks about fueling the vehicles. You have so many agencies that are supposed to be monitoring agencies that don't get fuel for those vehicles to go do their duties. Still, they go out daily. No one asks. And we saw a minister, Dave Umahi, trying to change the status quo, change the system,
and he pushed back.
He was pushed back. So how can we truly...
Don't
forget what you're about to say. But again, the question now is how possible can we change the narrative? Because you just said since the days of the Super PAMSEC.
Yes, they are powerful. They're really not accountable to anybody. And then there's this level of criminal negligence that seems to have happened. Usually, the report, Punariman's report, referred to that of the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry, and then the minister was being used as a scapegoat. What happened to the permanent secretary? It was his responsibility to call to the attention of the minister that you don't do things this way. And he also insists. In fact, the political office holder, that's the minister, ought not to be dealing with funds. So there is no reason you can hold the minister responsible for any kind of criminal malfeasance, financial malfeasance, and not hold the permanent secretaries. Now, for all of these failures, in fact, I'm looking forward to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu giving directives that, look, so long as there is any form of corruption associated with your ministry as PAM secretary, there is a presumption that you are guilty, because you ought to even prevent it. You ought to ensure that, procedures are followed. But we see these permanent secretaries are ensconced, because that's why they fight and kill over it, and when they are there, they think it's their time to enjoy without that commensurate responsibility to build in our country. We've seen it. PAM secretaries, for me, have not been good superintendents of this ministry so far.
Do you have a recipe to changing that?
No, see, the idea is we just need. So we need the president to come down hard and demand more from them. But again, the report talked about bloated public service, and then this idea, especially starting from the directorial level, Where do you see that sense of entitlement, to see that chop mentality in quote, that it's my time to chop? So it's not really about service. It's not really about service. It's about themselves. So government is organized in such a way that they want to benefit. That's the reason why they cannot, shout when there is any form of beneficence. Under the Buhari regime, there was this presidential initiative on continuous audit. But what came out of it? You see, the idea is that the public servants in our country are so skillful in the way of circumventing financial regulations to ensure that they carry out humongous corruption for themselves, on themselves.
So, Frank Tietie, apparently what you're saying is that the system itself is enabling corruption. So what are the incentives that you give to civil servants, not just to shun corruption, but to speak up where they find it?
See, it's difficult. First, the ethos, the mentality has to change. That I have said this too many times that I don't want to sound like a broken record. The idea is that it is public service. It is civil service. Civil service serves the president. It's an extension of the president's of the presidency. It's like the secretariat to the president. The public service, you work for the public, right? So if you don't want to get engaged in public service, it's more or less sacrificial. It's not a place to get a license for making money and then being subsidized with salary. I mean, it's not like that. But that mentality, first of all, has to change. You're asking for recommendations.
Is it the mentality that needs to change, Frank, or ensuring that you apply the rule of law strongly? When wrongdoers are punished, you send the right signals.
Look,
I mean, I thought you were going to
we have an auditor general in this country. We have an accountant general. Those individuals are supposed to be responsible in preventing corruption. Now, when you see such high-level government officials supervising corruption, and they themselves are the head of corruption. One of them was accused of stealing himself alone, stealing 109 billion naira. Then you need to underrate the skill of Nigerian public servants, especially at the level of directors and PAMSEC, in the way they work together with ministers, in the skill with which they circumvent the rules that they themselves created. You can't catch them, except in one way or the other there is one kind of whistleblower or somebody, one disgruntled element who just spills the beans. That's the only way EFCC will now begin to prance as if it has done its job. EFCC has not done much in preventing corruption. It doesn't even understand the system or how money flows within the federal public service. Don't go to states, because there is no form of any kind of scrutiny, not at all. But at the federal public service, these guys are just sitting there as if it is their turn to chop. So they devise all sort of schemes, to divert public resources.
Are we that hopeless?
No, not quite. And I'm not very hopeful with this Oronsari report, talk all over the town. We just need a president that means business. President Buhari may have started well, but he was overtaken and overwhelmed. This president needs to be in charge, in the sense that, of course, he's gone to Qatar and then he announced to the world that, look, my officials collect bribes a lot. So but this time around, don't bother to report them to ICPC or EFCC. Find a way to report them to me directly. You see, so the president understands that his country's public service is highly corrupt. What he needs to do is to, first of all, find a way to use some person as example. He replaced so many people, and I mean, look at the powers of the president, and that's why I'm not so happy that we are putting the cart before the horse in terms of the Oronsari report. I expected the president to have approached the National Assembly, acquire some powers to rejig the entire public service, get a bill that will totally, I would say, abrogate some of these ministries that have been created. I'm talking about departments and agencies that have been created post 2015, and then ensure that you have enough powers to carry out these reforms and not just go to town and say you are adopting a report. That's the kind of lazy approach we're often associated with Nigerian public servants. They don't do any work because they just think that it's a sense of mentality.
Where should the reforms be? Very quickly, where should the reforms be? I saw him speaking there. Did a very brilliant job. Yeah, I think I read it in 2015 in terms of he did a job before then, a prelude to the public service reforms. Nothing came out of it. You're talking about these brilliant minds
But when such kind of skill is circumvented and abused and turned upside down for the purpose, instead of for national progress and nation building, it is now used for personal aggrandizement on how to turn the whole place upside down. That's why we have a dysfunctional society. So the expectation is that I expect Goke Adegoroye's work while he was working on public service reform to be dusted first, and let's see, and let's have a situation where we can have financial regulations are being respected, and a public service that is driven to nation building, not this one with a sense of mentality of chop chop as they always do.
And lastly, before you leave, now that the president is aware, seem to be aware, going by his Qatar gist, what should he do? You know, you spoke about going to the National Assembly, but before that, are there quick fixes?
Yeah, well, yes, of course. For example, I would have expected the permanent secretary of Humanitarian Affairs Ministry to be suspended, and then we investigated for either some form of criminal negligence, or that is tantamount to collusion. So I didn't like.
But this is not just about the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry.
Humanitarian Affairs
Ministry as an example.
What happened?
He said that they need a scapegoat.
Of course, yes. Right. Just the same way Better Edu was used as a scapegoat, whereas he was involved in what was a normal thing that was happening every day in all the federal ministries. And then you single out Better Edu, for example, and then you say, oh, you caught her in the cookie jar, that kind of thing. No. That permanent secretary, because we're discussing the public service here. The permanent secretary who is supposed to be there, who is the highest official, who is the chief accounting officer, who sees to the movement of money in the ministry. Where was he? What was he doing? Now, did he protest enough to the head of service or to the secretary of the government? I mean, I find it very ludicrous that the man nobody mentions his name. So I expect the president to just select a few of them and sack them, and then even put them up for prosecution. And that is to show that he's on the right course. Right now, with all this talk about measures and all that, creating all these uncertainties, it also affects investment, because the foreign investment comes and relies on the public service, civil service, to process all the applications and all of that. With this, there's too much uncertainty. Well, the president should appear that he's in charge and is not going to tolerate any of these kind of government.
I think we should always steer something like this. I think we should revisit things like this quarterly and push to the extent that this change does happen. Frank Tietie, always a delight having you on Newsnight.
Thank you very much.